The two major political parties in the land have recently been embroiled in intra-party crisis, even as they ratchet up preparations for next year's planned general election. The governing All Progressives Congress, APC, seems to be worse hit by the internal wranglings, especially with emerging issues around the proposed National Convention, which has been scheduled for February the 26th. The main opposition, People's Democratic Party, hasn't fared much better in comparison. But in all, the political space appears to have become so energized by all the ensuing chaos in the parties. This morning, we have been joined for a discussion around all of that by Professor Pat Utomi, a professor of political economy and management expert. He currently spearheads a coalition of pressure groups working to provide an alternative to Nigerians apart from the two biggest political parties in the land. We will also pick his mind on the almost forgotten issue of diaspora voting and the contribution of Nigerians living in the diaspora to the country's democracy, economy, and national cohesion. Welcome to the program, Professor Utomi. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to join you. You look fresh, Stephen. I've not seen you in a while.
Thanks, Prof. You don't look bad either yourself. So you're welcome. Well, Prof, let's kick-start it this way. The political space is heating up. Candidates are emerging already. People are going to the president to express their interest to succeed President Buhari. As we read out, both parties have issues, clearly, both the PDP and the APC. But then you are proposing, and I know, of course, that you already had in place a kind of a shadow government, and we know that in a few weeks to come, there will be a major declaration from your good self. What's your assessment of where we are, knowing how 2022 will be very interesting politics-wise? And what is the third alternative that Nigerians should expect from you and from the coalition that you are leading?
Well, thank you so very much. I think the first thing to bear in mind is that there's a journey. How did we get here? You know, in the advertisement that preceded this conversation, there were those remarks, no one can save us but ourselves. And so if we're going to save ourselves from where we are, just take all the basic statistics. Nigeria is literally at the bottom of anything you can think of in the world. The policing video was a tragedy to view. 127th out of 127 in the ranking of police forces in the world, even the worst in Africa. That is so tragic that if I were anything in the police, I would do something radical or resign the day that kind of report comes out. You go to the numbers on healthcare. Look, what separates countries that have failed from countries that have succeeded? Some of the best research on the matter tells you that health is critical to the inequalities between nations. The countries that thrive are those that have paid appropriate attention to their healthcare. In Nigeria, everybody's dying from the challenges of healthcare. You know, education. Look where we are today. Look where we used to be. When I came to go to grad school in America in the late 70s, Nigerian graduate students, you expected, today some schools have to rethink Nigerian graduates being admitted in the United States. But we were considered, great peaks in the 70s. You had a Nigerian university degree, as the British educator Eric Ashby said in the early 60s, Nigeria's higher education was as good as the very best in the world. It was easier to get into Harvard than to get into the University of Ibadan in 1961. And we see decline all around us, rot, everything. And the question is why? And if you look at every indicator, a simple, obvious indicator is poor leadership. And this leadership has not been poorer than we have seen since the return to democracy in the last or current dispensation since 1999. And you ask yourself, how did we get here? And I think most of us know how. Now, military rule was terrible and needed to be fought. Who fought military rule? It was not the politicians. They were busy hiding somewhere. And a few of them that ran away said they were this abroad or that abroad. And civil society engaged the military until the military, could not hold on anymore and essentially beat a retreat. There were questions at that time. How should we proceed? Some of us who were part of the leadership of civil society in 1998 had to sit down and say to ourselves, what do we do? Some in the group proposed that we become a political party. I remember very clearly the Concerned Professionals, which was vanguard of the fight against military rule following the elections of 1993. The meeting of the leaders took place in my office in Victoria Island. I clearly remember that meeting. After the meeting, the question was, okay, most of us, the majority of us said, look, we are professionals. We came out to fight for our country. We came out to do citizens' duty. It's time to go back to do our work and allow the politicians, now that the military has agreed to leave, to come and take up the space and offer us the kind of leadership. Challenged as it was in the 60s, was clearly focused on the people. The struggle, the competition that led to trouble was a competition about which of the regions, or if you want to call them ethnic nationality groups, would best bring progress to their people. Some scholars, Melson and Wolpe, who worked on this in the 60s, wrote a book and called this competitive communalism, competing ethnic nationality groups on who would most bring progress to their people. Now, we thought, let those politicians come back, having learned a lesson from the problems of the division that competition brought about. They would now lead properly. But we miscalculated. I remember the day after that meeting, or not immediately after that meeting, we were standing in front of my office on the Dow Taylor. Donald Duke was saying to me, okay, people say you don't want to go into politics. I'm going to go and we'll go and organize and take over Cross River. And, the late Waziri Mohammed, all of those people had urged that we become politicians. A number of us said, look, we have played our citizens' duty. Let's sit back and watch. But what happened? The traditional followers of the Awolowo's, of the Sardaunas, of the Okbaras, and co. did not calculate that the military was really leaving. In the minds of many of them, the military was playing one of those games. They would go and come back. And they didn't want to stake their reputation on it. And so they sat back. And who moved into the space was the bagmen of the soldiers. It was the soldiers who wore new uniforms from khaki to agbada. It was the things that we really didn't quite want to happen to our country that happened. Unfortunately for Nigeria, even much, much worse happened. Oil prices, which had gone into single digits, $9 a barrel, suddenly, began to inch up, went into triple digits. We had $100 and something crude oil. And these bagmen of soldiers and rebranded soldiers essentially took this money that was coming to the Nigerian people, privatized it to their pockets, and used money to erect a barrier to entry into public life. Politics now became me, myself, and I, rather than service to the Nigerian people. It did not take genius to predict that we'll be where we are today, when Nigeria is the butt of all jokes around the world. And nobody can save us but ourselves. That civil society that said, enough is enough, back in those days, is beginning to say, we cannot continue like this. We have said that civil society does not go into politics, but we want to build a broad coalition of civil society and righteous politicians, fair-minded, service-oriented people who are citizen politicians, not professional politicians. Because what has happened to our political space is that because these people who have no addresses and live off and on politics are so self-driven rather than service-driven, what we have is a fight to the finish between them among who will grab power so that they can privatize the state. They can achieve state capture for their own personal benefits. The civil society is saying we must rethink politics in Nigeria. We must bring citizen politicians to replace the professional politicians and have a chance to save our country, to claim the promise of Nigeria that was set by its founding fathers, that has been given the lie by the line of politics that's been played in Nigeria. This is the reason that the two political parties, who are essentially one party, let's be very frank, and I know this very well, I am part of that effort to build, and I saw how it happened. Essentially, a part of PDP moved over, took up a couple of people to give them more credibility, and we had a new PDP and the old PDP, but we call them different names, APC, PDP. Let's call them one party now and have another party of citizens. That's what we must do in 2022 if we're going to save our country.
Understood. I mean, if we look at Nigeria as it stands now, we're all very comfortable with the fact that Nigeria itself is a federal republic, which means that it's a country that's devised and comprised of different states, and within those states there are governments, and of course there's a central government that has overarching power over them. When you talk about reclaiming or striving towards a better Nigeria, how revolutionary are you thinking? Do you think that as it stands now, when you look at the 36 states in this country, is there a single state that impresses you in its form of political organization, in the way it collects tax, for example, in the way it looks after its people, in the way it has educational or healthcare standards or housing standards? I just want to understand. It's really easy for us to talk about how the state of Nigeria is not good and that it was far greater decades ago, and we have to get back to that point. But I just want to understand how we can organize our footsteps to reach that. Do you think that, first and foremost, as I asked, that currently there's a state whose way of business is one that impresses you? And secondly, when you talk about the fact that a country doesn't prioritize health cannot expect to progress, how do you expect that to happen? In what ways can that change start?
Yeah, fantastic. The latter part of the question I'd like to start from, because yes, obviously there are pockets of good things happening around here and there. But let me start from the last part of the question about health. Just to show how Nigerian politicians have not managed to focus on what is important in Nigeria, and how we have created what Professor Jega likes to call a plutocracy, a government of the rich. What kills Nigerians the most? Malaria. How much do we spend on malaria? Can you think of how much we spent on COVID-19 in the last 2 years compared to what kills Nigerians the most? You will see a simple logic. Malaria, any rich man with small money in his pocket can buy anti-malarials and survive malaria. And so those who are dying from malaria are the poorest of the poor. Because poor people are being killed by malaria, Nigerian politicians don't think about it, don't care about it. It doesn't matter, let them die. But because COVID can reach anybody you reach, boom, our entire resources going to the COVID. Yes, important that we work the COVID path and stop it from killing people, but just compare the emphasis in terms of deployment of resources by Nigerian politicians. This malaria that is essentially doing such damage to Nigeria that Jeffrey Sachs, waxed lyrical about it many years ago as, what is needed, to be dealt with if economic growth will take place in Africa. The so-called explanations of growth in Africa, destiny, geography versus policy. The truth of the matter is that the Nigerian political class hasn't managed to put his head to what matters to the people. There's a disconnect between politicians in Nigeria and the people. The people are an excuse to grab power and use or abuse. We must organize politics around the people, because if we do, I can tell you very clearly, I am working on one. There is a vaccine that has more than 85% efficacy. We can get rid of malaria through this process. Nigerian politicians don't have a strategy on healthcare. It doesn't matter, because they don't realize that that is the heart of economic development. They think they can jump into a plane whenever they have headache and fly to London or India. that is wasting our resources and preventing us from growing as an economy. But they don't understand it, and they don't care, because their purpose is not about the people or service. It's about what they can grab if they can capture the stage. So now let's go to where there are pockets. Obviously, there are the pockets of things being done right. I mean, we've seen a few things done okay in Lagos, but they can be done much, much differently, much better in many areas. We've seen things done in state. I've been involved in trying to get the governors. I've spoken many times to the governors forum, to the various governors on different issues. During the course of last year, I ran webinars, if you will, with the governors. We took on issues like security. We took on issues like the environment. We took on issues like healthcare itself. So, yes, there are some things that are coming, but it's too slow. There's no grand strategy at those state levels. There isn't a clear national strategy. I mean, look at the state of unemployment in our country. Just imagine that we had a clear national strategy that focuses on our youth bulge and how to create a demographic dividend in Nigeria, how much further we would have been traveling. All the insecurity in the country is significantly because we have no clear national youth-focused strategy. This is why the coalition that is emerging of civil society and alternative thinking politicians will be a coalition of women, youth groups, professionals, and intellectuals, essentially focused on how government can again become about service to the Nigerian people and not politics of big men. We must move away from thinking big men to thinking big ideas, because it's changed the course of human history. Who are those who are thinking big ideas? We must stop looking to this big man who has stolen most of the treasury and has come to use that money to impress us in running for elections, and say, look, Lagbaja, we think you're a person of service. This is your whole life's track. Come out and be our governor. Come out and be president. Come out and serve us as senator. One of the things that we'd like to do during the course of this year is run a recall campaign. Civil society will run a recall campaign on elected politicians using technology. We have the INEC register. We have the voters who are registered. We're going to ask Nigerians, what do you think you need as leadership? Let them just determine what they want as their leaders. They establish it. We'll ask the question, this is your senator, this is your governor, this president, how well has he or she served you on this track? And we will get the numbers. When we get the numbers, we say to them, you know that you have a right to recall them if they are not meeting your performance criteria. We think you should begin to record this politician or that politician, and then we'll begin a campaign of recalls. By the time we are recalling half of the Senate and several governors, Nigerians will know that democracy is about government of the people, for the people, by the people, who are the ultimate sovereign. Right now, it's a government of politicians, for politicians, by politicians. The people are just an excuse in this so-called democracy we're running. And civil society that gave us this democracy, that fought for it, says enough is enough. It's time to get these people out of the way. Since those politicians became extinct, who were hoping would take over in 99, because they didn't think the military was on its way out, and these people stepped into the space, it's time to say to them, out of this space, we want Nigeria to be governed. It is not being governed right now. I mean, just look and see the rot and the mess and the kinds of personal animosities that are driving things, rather than what are the pains of the people. Until we can locate the pain of the ordinary person in those grand issues, we will not be able to explain history. And this is a C. Wright Mills that I'm really quoting here, because we look at Boko Haram and say, so what is Boko Haram? Oh, 10,000 people have died. Oh, you listen to the news every day. 50,000 people, 5,000 people. Those are the grand match issues. Take one person whose pain flows from that whole exercise and really look at the trajectory of that life. And when you realize that when one person hurts, we all hurt because of our shared humanity, you know that those who don't think in those terms should never, never be allowed to be called politicians. Because, again, it goes in so many ways. Just look at it. Take some of the small, big quotes. Ghanaian high life musician, Ben Bracco, tells you that when your politicians are richer than your businessmen, you are a country on the verge of collapse. That's what has happened to Nigeria. Our politicians are richer than our businessmen.
Professor Pat, we will go on a short break in a few minutes, actually. But before we went on break, I did start to ask you. We'd have to go. Okay, all righty. We have to go now. I'm told we have to go now. So please do stay with us. And when we come back from our break, our conversation will continue. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We're still joined by Professor Pat Utomi, who is a professor of political economy, and he's also a management expert. Professor Utomi, thank you for staying with us. I know that we had our conversation interrupted by that necessary break, and I thank you once again for staying with us. Now, when we talk about politics, you definitely have very strong ideas and strong criticisms on the current state of affairs and how you definitely see what the status quo should be, how Nigeria should look like. And I'm sure that comes from your desire to also have become governor in Delta State. I know that's obviously wasn't something that happened, but I know that you had the desire to do so. And I'd like to ask you, when you cast your mind back to that election or that organization process, what is it that you had to offer to Delta State, and what stopped you from being able to successfully reach that pinnacle? And then further, when we look at 2022 and of course look ahead to 2023, we are looking at a general election, and there are calls for an Igbo president and more Igbo candidates to come out. Would you be that person? Can we expect you to make a declaration to that effect?
You see, it's about the people and honest, not to hire crowds and come and say, these people have come to say to me to run. No, I've always seen service about people looking around them. Almost everything I've done in my life has come from being literally said to, you must do this as duty. I have never, I ran for president in 2007 and 2011. You got to look at the history of my involvement in public life. I played a leading role in organizing civil society to respond to military rule, the way that civil society responded. It was just a passion as a citizen for a better society to exist. And when that finished, I could have jumped in. Remember that at 27, I was in a presidential advisory position in Nigeria, back in Shagari's government. But for me, it's not about, me. It's about my autobiography is titled To Serve is to Live. It was written more than 20-something years ago, back in the 90s. Service is life. If you live a life in which everything is really about service, then people say to you, why don't you serve? There are people who said to me when the governorship thing came up, look, you've run for president, what are you doing with governor? The only reason I went to, and I've written books about this, you can read them. My last book, essentially focused on that process. Delegations came to me, the names of the people, where they came from, the group of old boys of government college, Uweli, and all kinds of people. And I said to myself, look, if people have come again, I don't want to be dragged out and then everybody goes back to their comfort zone and I find myself in the middle of this, no, we're going to do this, do that. Anyhow, I'm not blaming them. They wanted a better society. They looked around. They thought this person can help rescue us. They came to me. The process just proved to be a complete mess. Anybody who was in that process should never be able to hold their face up in public. It just shows that fundamental to the problem of politics is this belief that, hey, politics is fair game. You can cheat, you can lie, you can do anything that shows lack of character. It's politics now. We must end that in Nigeria. People of character have to enter public life. And this is part of the campaign that we are on. So, an Igbo candidate, if people came to me and said, look, we've looked at your background, We've looked at your whole life of service. We think that you are the candidate that the Igbo nation needs to offer to Nigeria. I would have no problem with that, but am I driven by the very fact of position? Look, there are people who have been president in Nigeria, who, if you give me their place in history, I would rather never have held any office in Nigeria than be what history will remember them as. So the fact of office or power has very little attraction to me as a person, but service to transform lives of people matter to me. And I say this all the time when I teach students. I said, look, when you ask somebody about India and ask them to associate a name to India, first name you hear is Mahatma Gandhi. And Gandhi held no office in India. He was not party chairman. He was not prime minister. He was not minister. But when you say India, the first name that comes to the head of most people, Mahatma Gandhi. So for me, the titles don't matter. In fact, one of my favorite things, I do a series, the Center for Values in Leadership that I created, has what you call the LWT series, the leader without title. And it comes from the work of a Canadian called Robin Sharma, who tells you that it's not the title that makes you a leader. There are many people who have titles, president, governor in Nigeria. God forbid that anybody should think of them as leaders, because they've done more damage to their country than any good. So what matters is that you serve with or without title, and that's what matters for me. But if that involves having a title at any point in time, I will not be scared to take that on. I've taken on most things in my life with courage, with conviction, and with building of capacity to do it. The problem in Nigeria is most times we find in public office who don't have the capacity, who have not developed themselves to be able to provide that leadership. And leadership takes two critical things. You must have knowledge and you must have a sense of service. If you have knowledge and you don't care about people, don't have compassion, you are as bad as not being, available for leadership. But if you have knowledge and you have a sense of service, you care about people, then, as Stephen Covey will say, that's the man who can lead. And so I'm never shy of being asked to take on such a challenge. But it is not the driving passion of my life to grab public office. Many people have grabbed public office in Nigeria and have made a complete mess of it because they don't have anything to do in the main. I mean, look at me. I've spent the last few weeks traveling around the United States, being invited by one group of Nigerians after the other to come and share things with them. I've had all kinds of pressures here. Fancy universities say, why don't you come and spend some time with us and all of that. So I'm not unemployed. Many people who are in politics in Nigeria are unemployed. It doesn't matter how fancy it sounds. And we must take that away from public life. We must make people in public life people that we turn to and say, make some sacrifice for the common good of all. Not, I need this position, I have to have this position. That's what the challenge of our country is. I hope Prof, that we will overcome it this year.
Okay, very well said, Prof. But let me take it a bit further than that. The movement that you lead, first, I'm wondering if in proposing a third first, an alternative in the manner that APC came about, I'm wondering if it is not too late. But I see that the paper that you presented recently in America, you have a role for the diaspora, for Nigerians in the diaspora, in your effort to rescue Nigeria. But then the diasporans cannot vote. They do not have the voting right yet. What's your view on that? And then if you're looking at the huge amount of remittances that they send back home, and I think which is bigger at $40 million, which is bigger than what we got from sale of crude oil in this budget. How, in specific terms, do you think that the Nigerian diaspora can play a role? You have proposed a Marshall Plan, you have proposed a blueprint for economic recovery. What role will you have for them, given the fact that, yes, they are not able to vote in the 2023 elections?
Yeah, the fact that they cannot vote is the biggest, if you will, indictment of the Nigerian political class. When your single biggest stakeholder in terms of, we make so much of oil, and the Nigerian diaspora remits more money to Nigeria than we earn from crude oil. And you can very matter of factly just wave them away because you know that they think and they are likely to be influential if they vote and change the trajectory of state capture, where a few politicians gather in the back of this thing, manipulate elections, and call themselves governors and presidents. And you, because of that, prevent them from voting. It is the worst crime that you can commit. I mean, it's almost equivalent to a war crime. Being able to treat the diaspora the way the Nigerian political class has done. It is not acceptable, and it should be fought with everything that is there. The diaspora should be able to vote. Smaller African countries than us have the diaspora vote. And we do this because politicians are constantly mindful of the fact that our country is not a democracy. They want to manipulate process to have themselves in power and remove the real stakeholders in Nigeria. Now, having said that, this is a thorough and complete indictment of the political class in Nigeria. I want to say that for a very long time, I've been part of initiatives to create a diaspora-driven economic revival process. What is the kind of economic strategy that will work to get us out of this unemployment scenario that we are in, where most of our young people cannot find work, and in their frustration, they become recruits for terrorist gangs and so on and so forth. And besides the fundamental role that education and healthcare plays in making that ready, we need an economic strategy. In my view, the preferred economic strategy is to piggyback on our latent comparative advantage and take our factor endowments, whatever it is, and it's available all across Nigeria. This is why this obsession with oil really frustrates and annoys me. Sokoto has its endowments, whether it's Gomer Arabic that it is. North Central has its endowments, whether it's sesame seed, and so on. Every part of Nigeria has these endowments. If you are going to focus on clusters of production from which you are going to try and create global value chains that our endowments enable us to dominate, a diaspora that is out there, capacitated because of the opportunities that they have where they live, connected because of the contracts that they have built up, knowing the country, and so are going to be less risk averse than a foreigner who just hears of this place in Africa, can then be the source of connecting up into the process. Look, India, China, even Japan all took advantage of this in their ascendancy. Following the Meiji restoration in Japan, the flow of technology and all of that into Japan, driven by the Japanese diaspora, majorly from Germany back about 100 or so years ago. If you look at what has happened to India, and there was a time as a business school teacher, I used to travel around quite a bit, still do, and I would come to the US and major the world's leading business schools had Indian deans. There was Jane in Kellogg. There was a chap at where my daughter goes to school, UPenn, Wharton, and there was so each time I was in Evanston, Jane was not in the country, and as I found out, he was always back in India. And then I realized he was on the board of Reliance Industries and all of these things. And that's how outsourcing became so focused on India. When Joseph Stiglitz wrote the book, Globalization and Its Discontents, looking at the challenges of globalization, which is very interesting, seeing how Paul Krugman and some of the other Nobel Prize-winning economists in America are now beginning to rethink globalization. An Indian economist at Columbia, Jagdeep Bhagwati, wrote a book in defense of globalization. Clearly, the Indian diaspora had focused on creating advantage for India through the outsourcing model, and it helped India's ascendancy. The Nigerian diaspora can do that and much, much more. And if we can work this into a national economic development strategy, it is the fastest way that we can have to growing the Nigerian economy, creating those jobs, becoming the next factory of the world, and essentially building the capacity to go to the next level in this fourth industrial revolution that we are located in. So I think that a national strategy that doesn't focus on diaspora is not a wise one, which is why one of the things that I've spent a good bit of my time doing is working that diaspora into realizing that they have a commitment and a duty to Nigeria. And I hope Nigeria realizes its own commitment and its duty to its diaspora.
All right, Prof, but you know, a lot of people will wonder that all these fine ideas, brilliant submissions, that why are they just coming now? Why were they not, why didn't they form the kernel of your propositions for the people in Delta when you ran and when you attempted to be the president of Nigeria? Why are they fresh ideas that can suddenly rescue us now?
Go back and read. They always were there. They came out all the time. But you see, Nigerian political class doesn't want to deal with ideas. They're frightened of ideas. They want to talk about big men. They don't want to talk about big ideas. And that's the tragedy of Nigeria. And that's why when people like Usman Bugaja and others who are working on the BNP project say that their focus is on getting people who have the right attributes for leadership to emerge, you know that they are really serious people. Because the problem of Nigeria is Nigeria has always tried to stop people who have the ideas about how to lead it out of these problems. Because first and foremost, the people who constitute Nigerian political class are people who are afraid of ideas. They are because it shows off their limitation. And they think politics is about divide and share. They don't know it's about making life. I mean, let's just take the China example. So it's not only a country that has had that problem. Look at the fate that Deng Xiaoping suffered in China. Cultural revolution, the work of the Gang of Four, the this, the that, the that. Thankfully for China, Deng emerged as Chairman Mao was passing on. And when he got to the stage, first thing he did, go and read all the speeches that Deng Xiaoping gave in 1978. His primary emphasis was to say to the people of China, we must respect and pay attention to people of knowledge. This is the future of our country. We are where we are because our party, the Communist Party, has not given primacy of place to knowledge, to men of ideas. And China turned that way. At the time that this was happening, Nigeria's GDP was literally twice that of China. You go down 30-something years, one generation, just one generation, and China is 30 times Nigeria. So it is not the first time in history that political class tries to put down people who think. But it has, unfortunately for us, defined Nigerian politics. I mean, if you think about the experience you pointed to in Delta, why would what happened in Delta happen? I was one of those who built the APC, wrote the roadmap, and all of that. Thankfully, the vice president himself is the one who keeps repeating that they wrote that roadmap in my house. He himself, myself, would sit down every other evening for weeks working on. So why would they play the kinds of games that they played with me? Simple. A fear of people who think. And I do know that our country deserves better than that. And we need to do things to change that.
Understood. Professor Pat Utomi, thank you very much for your time and for what has been a very interesting conversation with us this morning. There's time now for a short break.
Pleasure. I'm glad both of you are looking chippy and
Oh, so I finally got a compliment. It was just Steve at the beginning. All righty.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you indeed.
Thank you very much.